Hello, in this lesson you're going to learn how to prove that alternate interior angles are congruent and how to prove that corresponding angles are congruent. We're going to start with the title, which is Special Angle Pair Proofs. Okay, so in order to prove that alternate interior angles are congruent, go ahead and start with a pair of congruent vertical angles. And then you're going to state that a pair of corresponding angles are congruent. And then you're going to use the transitive property of congruence. Okay, so just a little bit of background information. These steps probably don't make very much sense to you. They will make more sense when you actually do the proof. So let's go ahead and look at an example. So example 1 says, use the information to write a 2-column proof showing that alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay? When a transversal crosses parallel lines. So we'll start with the given, which is S is parallel to T and M is a transversal. And then we're going to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. Okay, so first I'm going to label in my diagram that these two lines are parallel. I'm going to put these little arrow markings. And then I'm going to write the word proof. And underneath that, I've got statements and I've got reasons. Okay, and I'm going to draw a line here and a line here. Okay, so the first thing is S is parallel to T and M is a transversal. This is given to us. All right, the next part is I need to look for some vertical angles. Now the vertical angles need to be specific ones. I'm going to go ahead and mark angle 1 and angle 8 in my picture. Okay, angle 1 and angle 8 are alternate interior angles, and I'm trying to prove that they're congruent. I cannot use alternate interior angles are congruent as a reason in this proof at all. I have to prove it some other way. So I'm going to find a vertical angle to one of these. So I have to choose either 5 or 4. So 1 and 4 are vertical angles. I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to say angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. So this is vertical angles are congruent. Okay. And then after that, I need to find how can I connect these angles in another way. I can say I need to find a pair of corresponding angles. So I found a pair of vertical ones. Now I need a corresponding one, and it's got to use these 3 angles. So 4 and 8 are corresponding angles. I'm going to say 4 is congruent to 8. Okay? And the reason for this is corresponding angles are congruent. Okay? And then there's only one more step after this. So there's a reason why I listed 1 and then 4, 4 and then 8. Because that is the transitive property. 1 is congruent to 4. Okay, so I stopped at 4 and I started up at 4 again. 4 is congruent to 8. Therefore, this first angle and this last angle are congruent to each other. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. Okay, so this is the transitive property of congruence, and it's congruence because we're dealing with a congruent symbol. All right, we've got one more proof that we're going to look at. In order to prove that corresponding angles, this is different, corresponding angles are congruent, start with a pair of congruent alternate interior angles. Then state that a pair of vertical angles are congruent, and then use the transitive property of congruence. Okay, so here's the example down here. If I want to prove that corresponding angles are congruent, I cannot use corresponding angles are congruent as a reason in my proof. So I'm going to start with saying that K is parallel to S and that R is a transversal. And then I'm going to prove that angle 6 is congruent to angle 2. Okay, here's 6. Here's 2. Okay, and we're also going to mark that these lines are parallel. And then we're going to write down the word proof. And we've got statements and we've got reasons. Okay, so the first thing we're going to write down is the given. K is parallel to S and R is a transversal. And the reason for that is given. Okay, the next thing that we're going to write down is we need a pair of corresponding angles. Okay? Excuse me, a pair of alternate interior angles. My bad. Alternate interior. So we've got to use angle 6. And the only other angle that we could possibly use is 4 because they are alternate interior angles. So we're going to say angle 6 is congruent to angle 2 because alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay? And then we're going to write down the vertical angles. Okay, so 4 happens to also be congruent to 2. Now I'm going to start with 2 here. Since I left off on 2, on step 3, I'm going to start with 2. 2 is congruent to 4. Ooh, that is messy. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And that's because they are vertical angles. So you're going to say this is because vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so if 6 is congruent to 2 and 2 is congruent to 4, then 6 is congruent to 2. I think we actually made a mistake, so let me fix this. 6 and 2 is not what I meant to put. I meant to put 4. My mistake. Okay, so sometimes we learn from our own mistakes, and this is one of those cases. So let's go back and fix this. Angle 6 is congruent to 4 because they are, in fact, alternate interior angles. Angle 4 is congruent to 2 because they are, in fact, vertical angles. Now I have 6 is congruent to 4, 4 is congruent to 2, so 6 is congruent to 2. My mistake there was I forgot to look back at what I was trying to prove. Okay, and these are congruent by the transitive property. So my mistake really was 6 and 2 were not alternate interior angles, so that was my bad. This is the transitive property of congruence. All right, thank you so much for watching.